It is time to move on to the roundtable discussion session. We will ask all our speakers to please take your seat on the stage. And before that, please get ready. And we would like to also introduce the roundtable discussion moderator. Professor Joe Troland is from Hankuk University of Foreign Studies, and he will be moderating the session with our wonderful conference speakers. How about we give them a big round of applause?
Thank you very much, Aaron. It's a pleasure to be here today, and hopefully you've all enjoyed the amazing speakers talking about the importance of big data and technology. So please give them a round of applause for their fantastic presentation. And I want to thank you guys for being here as well. And I saw some of my former students and students out there, so a big thank you for them, even though some of them skipped class today to come here. But it's good to see everybody here. The idea of, several people talk about personalization, and I think we've gone from the traditional fans who just show up to the game for 90 minutes and then go home. They have an intricate, want to know the details for it. And so I think the information today showed that in the sports industry we are continually innovating, changing the landscape from the stadiums from offline to online. And you had mentioned about the dashboards, and I know there's everybody talks about Real Madrid, Barcelona, two big teams. Is there a difference, or how do you kind of utilize what you have to kind of improve the marketing for the smaller teams in La Liga?
Hello. Okay, yeah. Sorry. Well, I think that La Liga doesn't have like a policy of if it's a small team or a big team. Normally, what we do is we create these strategies and we offer the same services to every single club. We think that if you are in La Liga, then you should be treated the same. So the same rules apply for everyone. There's no distinction if it's a big football team like Barcelona, Real Madrid, or a small team like Eibar, because we are still doing the same thing. We try to have a very competitive league and a very competitive competition. So basically, this dashboard that I was talking about earlier is available for everybody, and the same data and the same information that we gather together is for every single club. So there's not really a big difference in La Liga between big football teams and small football teams.
Thank you very much. And as you registered, some of you had questions on there, so I'll utilize some of your questions. Just one more for you. And how long did, one of the questions, how long did it take for La Liga to make that practical, or are you still working on making it practical?
Well, as I said before, we've been working with data for a long time now. Well, not a long time. I mean, it's been 4 or 5 years. But the first results, we're just starting to see the first results. So I guess it's a matter of time. We're in the early stages, and we do have practical data now because we learn a lot about fan engagement and how they consume football and sports. But I think that there's so much information that we are missing right now because we are in these early stages. There's so many more things to come in the future for La Liga.
I'm kind of same with you. What about on Arsenal as well? How long do you think it would be make it more practical? Talk about, you had the 700 million fan base again, and you talk about the reach. How do you monetize that global fan base? How do you engage?
Yeah, so I think the point I missed on is you have direct revenue generation and then indirect. So the indirect revenue generation comes through the partnership model. So it's about how important it is for brands to work with our brand, help them engage sometimes in more fun way than that brand can offer. So there's excitement when they associate with sporting brands. So it's around how can we take those key pivotal moments and drive that engagement. And brands are becoming more savvy, so it's no longer, they'll sign up to a sponsorship deal without access to certain rights. And a lot of those rights come back to how we prove the value of that relationship. And the only way you can do that is through data. So it's becoming more and more important for clubs to make investments like Liga around building out single views, bringing in that information and that insight and delivering that out. What we're working on is really treating data as an asset of the organisation, and that's an education piece which is quite difficult. So traditional sporting organisations, and it's really saying, there's one thing collecting data, there's another thing having the right to engage with that person, and you get it, especially in Europe, there's a lot of regulation around what you do with data, but it's important that you are clear with the fan around how you're using that information, and then as educating people in the organisation, there's a value associated to it, because if everyone wanted access to all of the data all of the time, then suddenly you've got less data that will last as long as what you need to do with it. So that's how we're doing that transition and transformation. It's very hard to say how long it would take to move from day one to building out sophistication. Big data is a big term, but I guess the way we try to approach it is saying, anyone that's worked with data, there's just more of it. Right? It's not necessarily big, especially in the sport world. We're not dealing with the reams of data some organisations are, and it's about making clear choices around driving investment making think value and back to business. Because there are lots of organisations who probably approach all of us here, and it's there's no business case for it, so you have to go back to what are the benefits and how we can make that value.
Talking about engagement, Duncan, what about, after Joe was pretty much on there, and how long do you for your experience, the British public, how long did you really start to accept or engage into the You hear that? Yeah, very good now. I was just saying there, sometimes, being from the UK, Ireland area, we're very traditional in what's a game. We've got good engagement and used to pick that up. How long, was there much resistance, or how long did you think it maybe take for the people from the home nations that can accept this use to pick that in?
I think there are still quite a lot of people who aren't that convinced by it, and that's fine. I don't think people interact and experience sport in a number of different ways, like they do everything. There's no right way to experience it, and I think what it does is it gives you variety. You can use data, you can use anything to kind of enhance the way that fans kind of engage with their sport. And what we found is that you segment that information depending on the audience. So you can have one bit of information, you might present it 6 different ways for 6 different sectors. So a brand might want it to match their sort of brand messaging, a club might want it in a kind of positive fashion to make them look good, an analyst might want a quite technical thing, and a fan might want something that doesn't even feel like a piece of data, it just feels like a kind of bit of information. So, we've spent a long time kind of making sure we've got experts in each of those areas so that we can always tailor the information to the audience.
All right, great. One of the questions here going to be is what are do you think the key strengths are about data storytelling, say, compared to traditional storytelling?
Well, I think what we've seen in the last year or so is a generation of writers now who are a bit like we've seen with managers. We've now got younger managers who've lived with data their whole careers as players, so they're kind of more, they understand it and they're used to it. And I think we're seeing the same with people that write about football as well now. So, and I think what the big development for me in the last year draw to is that people now combine. It's not like traditional football writing and data writing. The best usage of it is when you combine the two. So you might, and you still start with a good anecdote at the start of a feature, but then you'll drill down into some of the numbers and then you'll kind of bring it back around to how that's going to affect the team or the player. And I think, you know, that is very much a kind of a modern trend and one that should continue.
Yeah, I know myself, being as a Liverpool fan myself, you know, come back across the play and watch the game. Most times when I say policy by accident. When I wake up in the morning, just check Twitter or check Facebook, and then I would check the traditional newspaper. So I think the technology now is really influencing how we interact with them. But James, I want to ask you about, you mentioned 5G would be a big player in the stadium, and I know Korea would have Wi-Fi here, but there is some resistance to 5G in certain. You know, how do you think the majority of future stadiums will utilize 5G, and how do you see as the planning side would you overcome, say, local resistance to 5G?
I think there was an example that I gave there of the stadium in Anaheim looking to build their own private network. And I think there's this combination of, yes, we need to install 5G. The telcos obviously have a motivation to have 5G in these environments. But ultimately, who's controlling the data and who's controlling that end-to-end customer experience is probably the most pertinent question that should be asked. And I think that there are certainly positives for a new facility that's you know, looking to do the planning around potentially a private network within their facility to control every single aspect of the customer. And we're talking about both front of house engagement and back of house engagement. How do we optimize some of the systems and processes that are in there? And again, the big thing is just to ensure that when a user walks into an environment, it's seamless. There's no constraints around, I can't access the network, I can't find my digital wallet, I can't purchase something. You know, we know certain aspects of biometrics and cashless payments, and those elements are going to provide more efficiencies in the venue. And I think that those networks in these venues are going to need to be really robust to respond to that, because as soon as there's a pain point, then that journey becomes negative, and the customer gets frustrated. And in essence, that can fall back to the club, because ultimately the club has got the game at the stadium. So there's, I guess, a discussion point around, will 5G give us the penetration? Because certainly the speeds are going to be incredible, but whether the private network is a better solution longer term.
Okay, thank you very much. You know, another question we had mentioned that a lot of us, you know, sometimes we don't have much cash or a lot of different cards. What about the idea of you know, the cashless thing, everything that is automated? Do you think it's closer than ever to happen?
I've seen some case studies recently, in particular a venue in Australia that's implemented a cashless facility. It's a cricket oval and an AFL oval that plays multiple sports, and the numbers are pretty impressive. The speed of delivery, speed of service are probably the key things there. Just the ability to manage peak times, I guess, during you know, certain moments of the game as such. So I think it's inevitable. You know, and then you layer that on top of biometrics and some of the other technologies that will certainly mature over the short term. I think it's inevitable that cashless will mature across multiple markets.
Yeah, I was just going to add that research also shows average basket increases. So obviously when you do go cashless, people do spend more when they transact on cards.
I mean, especially in stadium, you have few drinks. It's easier to bring out the card and swipe than it is to bring out the cash. Danny, you talked about, you know, the OTT and all, and the one thing that I've looked at is, you know, the betting aspect. You know, can you explain how Sports Radar and betting just a little bit more? how you get involved in that. And we heard some piracy, but how about the legal aspects in the local communities that they're in? Do you think we have to work with other companies to ensure that legality is protected?
Then we do very carefully about picking the right partner, about also when entering the betting market. You see the sport-related ecosystem, we were handling the regulator, the betting operator, but also the integrity service to make sure, because it's very important, the data and also the match-fixing issue. So like the example what we doing NBA. So I think the first thing we do, we know the US markets is looking for opening the market. So I think we already entered the market a few years ago before we legalized. So we make sure the leagues understand why the betting market, what the issues we need to take care of. So I think they all understand the data, the speed, accuracy, and the trust is very important. And also how we avoid any match fixing things. So we create the integrity team to make sure they understand for that. And then also we're very carefully about all the betting services like in South Korea. We're also providing to K-Token, providing the data point to them. So I think the strength of the spot rate at current position correctly, we provide stable, accurate, speedy, and also depth of the data point to go serve to them. So we can see a big challenge in that. Because we take care of all the stakeholders about all the betting prime.
And I know Leonis figured out down here. Okay. You mentioned anti-piracy, and I know sometimes when I'm on, back out, and it'll be it'll be a big game going on or a big fight going on. All of a sudden, I'll get a message going, check this link, check this link, check this link, check this link. How prevalent is piracy to, say, OTT or your specific areas where you're streaming? How much of a risk do you think it is? And what do you do to prevent it?
Well, with piracy factors, is that it is really very difficult to see or even predict who, there are so many people who commit piracy and so many factors and websites that do these piracy things and stream our content online in an illegal way. So obviously the risk is always going to be there. The fight is always going to be there because the more the new technologies develop, the more illegal content is going to be released. New technologies do not only develop for us, which we are like the agents and we take care of the product, they do develop too for people who buy devices in order to stream these content illegally. So I guess the risk is always going to be there. We just need to develop better technologies to help the product to be protected and help our broadcasters to not have these kind of problems.
Thank you. Danny, what are some partners, the NBA, protection-wise, what do you think?
So I think that this was very important for them when they consider that. So I think they think very carefully about this sport layer technology to make sure there's review that. I know this is a not 100% perfect solution, but I think they already get the benefit from that because when company that's the limitation. I think there's already make a leverage on that. So make sure fans can get connected through OTT to get the content.
Yeah, I think that as soon as you take one site down, another site pops right back up again, so it's extremely time-consuming to try and stop it all. It's never 100% proof.
Well, it definitely consumes time, but it's worth doing all the things that we do. Because for example, we invest a lot in anti-piracy. We have 3 different tools to detect and identify all these websites. So we know that it's easy to create a website and just stream content in there. But still, if no one is doing anything, this is never going to stop. So we need the fan to understand that this is not the best way to watch a football match or any sports or concerts, or like it's not something only about sports. It goes like to broader, environment. So it's important for the fan to understand this, and it's important that we protect it and lobby with each other and collaborate with each other so that we can protect our products, like in a general way.
Okay, yeah, I believe that's correct. And it's also a certain extent that when you have a loyal fan is probably not going to use an illegal link. They're going to go onto the regular platform and do it. Nick, you mentioned values and your virtuous cycle or circle. What do you think? Does values drive success, or success drive values? And where do values fit into the virtuous circle?
You mean monetary value?
Yeah.
It's a good question. I think success definitely drives value, and then what you do with that value helps drive success. So it's definitely, in my mind, it's definitely that way around, because obviously you build up reputation, you build up your fan base, and then obviously the fans want to engage with. Sport is quite simple. It's a lot easier when you're winning, and a lot tougher when you're not winning. So, your fans are still there. It's about using data to understand how they want to engage with the club. We've had situations where the club would sometimes stop communicating because they thought that was the right thing to do. And there are certain fans that nurture contact, and times are tough and they want to be in it together. And then there are those fans that say, don't talk to me, I'm fine, let's leave it till the next game onwards. It's always about the next game. So I think the fact that you can then use data to understand how they're engaging, when they come onto your site, what are they doing when they come onto the site, and how they change their behaviour according to the results, allows you to do things that are right or not so, and stay away from upsetting the fan. You can use that information and that drive value as well.
On that note, I think we've seen a big transformation in the last sort of 4 or 5 years on how clubs communicate as well. So if you go back sort of a decade or so, even on social media when it first came out, clubs would kind of just use it like a press release. It would be, the manager's said this or this player says that. Whereas now, they kind of push out content that's almost like fans are making it, and it connects with fans a lot more, I think. And it also, it almost gives them a slight get out clause when the club is struggling, because you've got that better connection with the kind of social voice of the club, which I think is quite useful.
Yeah, we work very hard. Our team, our media team, they're a lot younger and smarter on these things than I am, but it's about getting that message that resonates, because sometimes what they do is the fans, as I said, crave contact, and sometimes it works, and there'll be occasions where it doesn't work, and they'll let us know it doesn't work, but it gives them a voice.
Yeah. No, you mentioned humanising the stories, and I think it's a very, very good a point to do, because for myself, when I was growing up, we didn't really, it wasn't the internet when we were growing up. So you kind of watch teletext or CPAX to get the information. And you can see this from the Harry Kane example within 2 years, how it's grown again. But do you think ever is there a fine line between too much data, overload of on fans that they don't want it, or they're just they'll end up resisting all this information?
Yeah, I think so. I think when kind of big in-depth data first came out, people just kind of, would put as much of it out there as they could, kind of quantity rather than quality. And I think it's all about the interpretation, it's all about coming up with, interesting angles on stuff, and just don't overdo it, use it in the right amounts, and it's like anything, just create stuff that's interesting and people will stick around.
I think the stories is more important than the actual data itself, the story you tell behind it.
Yeah, it's very rare you get a completely data-led story, so that Harry Kane one was quite rare in the sense that it was literally about him, not scoring, and that we found and then pushed out. Most of the time, you're inserting yourself into the general conversation. So last season, you know, Virgil van Dijk, everyone was saying he's the best defender in the world, so you're kind of trying to find an angle that will back that up. And lo and behold, there's got a good one that really resonates with fans. So it's, most of the time, it's almost trying to piggyback on the general conversation. I think that's something you shouldn't forget. You know, most fans just want to talk to their friends about this player's good, this player's bad, this team are getting better, this team are getting worse. So, you know, if you remember that, then it's relatively easy to kind of insert yourself in the conversation.
You can win many pub quizzes with some good data, but Virgil is a bit mental reports, I have to say. James, back to the stadiums, we mentioned traditional fans, and Spurs Stadium is probably the ideal premier stadium right now. How do you kind of, when you're looking to build stadiums, planning-wise, I think keep the same, build the stadium, make it seamless, but still kind of engage with the intrinsic people who just want to watch a game and enjoy a game? When you're planning, do you think about both sets of fans?
In terms of the competing teams?
Yeah, well, just more about, you know, sometimes you just get fans who just want to go and watch the game.
Sure. I think the design team did an incredible job trying to understand the context of the environment. Obviously, they've gone from White Hart Lane, which is a much smaller stadium, to nearly a 62,000 seat stadium, so significant additional seating inventories within the stadium. Understanding that core fan, and that's why within the one grandstand we've got 17,000 seats, which is a wall of noise in essence, and that's your traditional hardcore fan that just is going to be there every single day for every game and every opportunity to engage with the club. But I think where our design team had a lot of success was looking at the local area and actually trying to bring in some of the local cultural elements into the stadium from an F&B perspective. Bringing the local chip shop into the stadium so that fans would get to the stadium earlier and know that they can go to their favorite chicken burger shop or fish and chip shop. They know that they can get their favorite beer because it was blended in with the local fabric of Tottenham as such. So that was a critical thing in terms of being able to look at your core fans that will be there early, no doubt, for the game, but actually there's a whole range of other customer segments that you can actually get there early. The marketplace under the one grandstand has obviously been a huge success. The numbers are staggering in terms of what they're turning over revenue-wise on game day. And I think it's that notion of seeing how we can align that facility, whether it's from inside the facility as well as the surrounding suburbs, and building, in essence, a really strong customer proposition that says, get here early, we're going to meet all your needs from an engagement perspective. And obviously there's a great football experience when you're inside the seating bowl, but it's being able to tap into all of those moments on that journey so that the day is much more seamless than maybe a venue that doesn't have that great offering from a hospitality perspective.
Thank you, Dave. I know from, if you look at what clubs have done around the world, they do seem to engage with the local community. And in Grey Hairs ourselves, like we look at the Seoul 88, the Olympic Park, it's really utilised by the local community constantly throughout. It's not a white element per se. So again, when you're incorporating the planning or maybe the after use or the continued use, do you engage with local organisations?
Without a doubt. I mean, Tottenham was a massive urban regeneration project. I mean, there are lots of stadiums that sit by themselves, and that notion is changing. You see in America some of the other developments around baseball are being much more integrated into the urban fabric, even in the soccer environment in the States, for example. And certainly we're seeing that happen in the Asia-Pac market. I mentioned the project that we're working on in Hong Kong. So this is Kai Tak Sports Park. This is in an urban area, and there are going to be 100,000 people living in and around the stadium. There needs to be a park, a community space for these individuals, young families, to engage in sport and entertainment and leisure. So you need to be thinking about those local people and the community to drive not just economic benefit, but it's a whole of social impact and environmental impact as well from that perspective. So yeah, Spurs is obviously a great example. It's brand new, and I think you'll see this trend shifting quite a lot as clubs look to do investment work around their facilities, because it needs to be a community asset in essence. It's not just the club is one aspect, but how you actually blend it into the local fabric is probably the underlying kind of challenge that we need to solve.
Yeah, I think it's the same as, it's brick and mortar, but it's the same as data where, you want it to the individuals to become part of that community, just like you want the data stories to be part of their lives, where they wake up in the morning and first thing they do is they check and they look at the stories and they tweet the story, or they center to the rest.
It's so true, and I think even with Tottenham, they've got the Tottenham experience, so if a fan is in London and they want to have some kind of engagement, there's a whole interactive experience. Arsenal's retail area has been hugely successful, so it's around trying to look at other I guess points of engagement that we can actually get that is not game day for that matter.
Yeah, I know with my students, I mean they're Tottenham fans or Arsenal fans, so I've convinced a few of them to go to Liverpool, but I'm still struggling to get the rest.
I think both Arsenal and Spurs should be, kind of commended. It would be very hard to do, but they basically built new grounds in almost exactly the same spot with Tottenham, and pretty near the old spot with Arsenal. That again helps the sense of community, and it's not completely unfamiliar. Like you don't move to the outskirts of town. I think it's quite cool.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I think we look at Seoul. We have Yongsan military-based league pretty soon. So it'd be, it's a big space. So I wonder what the Yongsan group of Seoul City will utilize that space for. We do use some parks and maybe some sports areas of recreation. Danny, you mentioned the revenue stream. You mentioned brand values indirect. Can you explain a little bit more about that as a revenue stream? Where we get?
As mentioned, that the OTT, we have different partners. We set very clear objectives with them, because while I showed you the OTT revenue growth, right, around 123 billion by 2023, we see this doesn't mean people just find a good best way to get revenue. This is why we make it like it's different stages. When I mentioned brand revenue, we need to make sure when we have the clients working together, what states they're looking for. For example, the OTT is on the perfect solutions for all the brands and all the right holder. So when we're talking about brand revenue, we want to make sure the brand understand the status. Right now, they want to build awareness, or they want to extend the user base. This is a little different, because we have experience with WRC Plus. So it takes almost 2 years' time. We started planning for some subscription base. So which means during this time it's still building the friends base, building awareness. So we think the OTT platform is giving them more idea, clear picture. It take 1 year to do it, or take 3 years to do this, or for some brands or some content holder, they already have a very high brand awareness. So when next they really want to do some subscription base. So I think this is step-by-step stages when I take a look about the OTT using this for the branding approach or brand building of the value.
All right, that's great. Well, a couple of you guys have mentioned voice assistant, and I know it was one of you on your last slide. You're going to be thinking about the future. I think Bixby, Samsung, it's so usage, but I think didn't have Siri on there, Apple, iOS. In the future, what percentage do you think could you utilize, and how could you utilize voice assistant for the Liga?
I would not be able to say a percentage, because that's something that it's unpredictable, but I would say that most of the people nowadays, and it's something that I've seen it on a personal level, most of, like if you're having a beer with some friends or something like that, the first thing that if there's a kind of debate about something, you just go to Siri or Cortana or whatever, you ask a question, and it gives you the question right away. You don't even have to look in the internet or, like type the words and search for the answer. It's right there. So I guess this direction is one of the directions that like fans are going to turn to when they need immediate answers to some things, or like in my case, La Liga related. So it's obviously a pretty interesting field to explore. And as I said, we're in the early stages of this. We just started with voice assistants. But I guess it's going to be, like most of people in the future are going to use this kind of methods to get answers instantly.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, like I know, I get Siri by accident and I'll say something. You know, I haven't brought in Amazon yet or the house because I don't want to order stuff that I don't want to. But no, you know, the idea of connecting with the fans through the data and personalizing it is, you know, extremely important. Like back to, you know, your profiles, you had different profiles. You know, how do you kind of create those profiles and, you know, the international, you mentioned the location and that kind of ideas together, but how do you create them?
It's a quite a long story, but I'll try and keep it brief. But what we discovered with the data we had at the club, and most sports organisations would be very similar. You know what your fans are buying, you don't know much about them. So the way that we started off was looking at which data elements we were missing. So we knew that, you know, you decided to buy your Liverpool shirt on a Saturday, and you bought one 3 years in a row. But I don't know, are you buying it for yourself? Are you buying it for your family? Are you buying it for your children? Do you have children? Where do you live? I'm not sure. So we worked with a data company. So we work with a company called Experian, but I'm sure there must be some local companies here that would help organisations. And you can take postal address information and then give it to that company, and they would overlay it with a demographic profile. So that demographic, and you can buy data at different varying levels in the UK. So you can buy it at postal level, so basically where the person lives, or you can go down to the individual and get some key variables around. So the key factors that we looked at were, you know, what papers do people read, what brands do they buy, what cars do they drive, do they own their own home, do they rent. You know, there's over 1,500 variables that we took and we overlaid onto our data, and basically gave that to some smart analysts, and they profiled the information and came up with 7 segments. And then where we get involved with marketing is then coming up with names that resonate with people, and then creating profiles. And I didn't bring it with me, but for our UK fan segmentation, we created a cartoon video. So the profiles are very different because they're not covering the whole world. They can be very, very specific about the idiosyncrasies between the various groups, so that really educates people around, you know, whether there's high levels of disposable income or low. And if they're low levels of disposable income, continuing to approach fans with high value hospitality products is probably not the right way that you should be operating your business. But that's the way we were operating our business. We were trying to sell everything to everybody, and it wasn't working, and it was annoying quite a lot of people. So taking that information helps to deliver, you know, better messaging.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that kind of shotgun approach doesn't work much anymore when we have a lot of the personalization. I think we'll open some questions to the floor. Whoever wants to ask a question. I think there's a couple of people who have microphones. Declan, up there. Do you have a microphone? He used to scream at him. He was my captain of my soccer team here.
I did a study on football environment, and most of the people answered the reason they use the hierarchy of the national game they want.
Because they cannot cannot watch the game they want.
So if you think about the terms of taxes, like you think about the taxes was like the landlord or credit, and I'm like, and I only want to watch my game. But I don't think people are so interested in watching a whole group of games. They only want to watch their team. Are you developing any system to focus on that?
Well, we try in La Liga to optimize this kind of like the time slots and everything. Obviously, if a football club has fans all over the world, it's very hard to please everybody because these clubs might have fans in America and fans in Asia too. So I get the part that they're gonna try to look for alternatives to watch this football match. But I believe, and I truly believe this, if you're a true fan or you really support your football team, you should not be doing that because you know that you're decreasing the value of that team. You're not giving them the income that they need to progress and grow in the future. So I do understand that because we're old people, so I get it. But what we try to do in La Liga is to make them understand that obviously we are not going to be able to put the time slot where everybody wants to watch the football match. But maybe the alternative would be in the future to have these football matches with like the OTT or something like that, so that you can watch them later through an official channel. But if you want to watch them like as they are happening, there's gonna be some times that you're not gonna be. It's not gonna. It's impossible like to please everybody every single time.
Subscription, like 100. The NFL they have a subscription where you can pay like $100. You get every game. You can just choose the game you want to watch. It's up to you. I think there's the reason for piracy is people want to watch games, not that they don't want to pay for them. There's a package at the moment that is helping the fans watch the games they want to watch. And to get information, have you thought about like working with the piracy websites to find out, okay, which fans, which places are watching these games, then you get more data on the necessity.
Well, like to work with these websites that
Well, get data on the fans who are actually watching it.
I mean, there's two sides of this, all right? The first part is that there are some really huge and strong websites, and everybody, like there was one in Spain that we recently took down, and everybody went to that website to see our football matches, our content. We could collaborate with them and say, hey, you could become an official partner, but that's not the way they should be doing or the way to start a relationship. If you're streaming things illegally, there's a way to turn things around and say, hey, but you could become official. I think that if you want to stream and create value and create something that is useful for users or for fans and for the companies, you should start the right way.
No, I think you're right. I think you can't. Once you cross the line, you can't go back.
Yeah, I just think that there are some lines that you cannot cross with that. And if there's some website or some company that is streaming illegally or content, obviously we could try to create some kind of like synergy and take advantage of that. But in my opinion, it's not the best option.
It's Pandora's box. Once you agree with one, the next one, the next one, the next one. Vic, you want to say something?
I was just going to say, actually, next week is going to be the first time that the Premier League broadcast on Amazon, and all the games will be simultaneous, or all will be shown on the platform. So it's a space that I think leagues are looking at, and obviously the NFL model is quite an interesting one, but because of the timeline it takes around selling of those packages, it's a bit like I was talking about earlier. The world moves a lot quicker, the platforms move a lot quicker than some of those deals. So I think it'll be interesting to see what that model does. I've got no idea how it will play out, but we're trying to support Amazon. It's a new route, and it will be really interesting to see how those platforms take a look at playing out live sport.
And they're going to be doing red zone, so go rush program, so which I think would tick a lot of those boxes. So.
I just think I think we're catching up to. I mean, we're always probably a little step behind the piracy experts because they're ahead of the curve, and we're just kind of catching up to the curve with it. That you okay? All right. Okay. One more.
Put that on. You put it on, and the OTT also provides some options for them. Yes, besides the live streaming, the content provider also creates some interesting story video things to make sure they add more value to the user. Because anti-piracy things are very, very critical for that. We make sure we have live streaming legal. That's very important. But we can't prevent all, but definitely put a lot of effort on that. So I think mention about education is very important. But as a content provider, we need to think about interesting story, interesting video, make use of the interactivity of the OTT to make sure they love it and then enjoy it and follow. I think it's a step-by-step approach for that.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate that. Bill, one more question here.
예, 아스날 MC의 CRM 책임자들이 포인트 질문하겠습니다. 팬에 대한 프로파일을 만드는 매뉴얼이 12개의 테리토리를 만들어서 굉장히 있거든요. 근데 그렇게도 그중에 아시아라는 들어가 있는 코리아가 안에 있습니다. 근데 저희가 코리아도 생각할 때는 월드컵에도 셰프라리라는 것을 나갔고 그리고 라리가나 아니면 프리미어에 나가는 선수들을 또 많고 또 우리가 대한민국들이 어떤 그에 대한 결정에 대한 많이 있는데 어떤 크리테리어를 가지고 한국이 거기서 빠졌는지 그걸 통해서 우리 한국이 어떤 축구에 대한 또 다른 공을 만들어주는 이런 걸 알고 싶어서.
Okay, it's about the data. So it's the data that we had to be statistically significant to build out a profile that would work. So we had to pick the countries where we held the most data that would allow us to enrich that data by working with third party. We would obviously love to have the amount of data in Korea that would enable us to do that and make it valid. And it's one of the things we're here to try and build our presence in Korea and how we adopt. Unfortunately, the clubs and I think the industry is catching up in how you capture that data. And it's vitally important that you capture it in the right way. And 3 years ago, people would see data capturers getting in the way of trying to do something. It's about educating the organisation so that we're capturing the right thing. We're continually having challenges internally around areas saying, well, if you put up a registration wall in front of seeing some content, then that just impacts queuing numbers. And it's an ongoing balance to be able to capture the right information about something. So we're investing in sophisticated technology to better capture information. So the more Korean fans that we have, the more data we'll have, and as soon as we have that, we'll increase the model.
Thank you. I think you just steal some men from Spurs. You'll increase your Korean fan base exponentially. That one.
He would be more than welcome.
I think that's one more question. Time for one more.
옥타에 계신 유관 보여주셨는데 일단 옥사가 좀 많은 데이터를 사용하고 그런 데이터들이 보통은 이제 기업이나 뭐 언론, 방송 쪽으로 이렇게 많이 제공이 되는 것 같은데 혹시 팬들을 위한 서비스가 뭐 옥타고나 뭐 그 외에 뭐 준비하고 계시거나 그런 팬들을 위한 서비스가 제공되는 게 있는지 그거에 대한
Yeah, I mean that's our social media content really is that. We never kind of planned to have a sort of B2C outlet, but Opta Joe's obviously the UK Premier League one, but then we've got Opta June in here in Korea and various other ones across the globe. And you know, it's really important for us to have these because it's really useful to see what fans like and what they don't like. I mean, most people will know that people on social media are quite quick to let you know if they don't like something. Might have come across that. So, you know, stuff that we used to think was quite innovative hasn't really impacted on fans, and some stuff that we might have thought was a bit old-fashioned or simplistic has still really cuts through. So it's a good kind of test bed as well. So it's really important.
And one more over here, right there in the black, the black jacket. You know, okay, right next to you there. Right. One more. We'll stay to 10 o'clock. What do you think?
Thank you for your time today, and it was good to hear how data are utilized in many different ways in, you know, the fan engagement, stadium venue operations, and the sports betting. I want to ask how data can create story around corporate partnership strategies from you guys.
Okay, well, you want to take it?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what I do these days is working with brands as well, which is perhaps not quite the same, but it's similar, I guess. So, you know, data is quite agnostic. So a brand might have access to certain teams or certain players within those teams, but unless those players do something, you know, you might sign up a really good player, but then he breaks his leg and he's out for the whole season. So what data allows you to do is basically have conversations around the whole league. You know, you can create sort of ranking systems based on data and basically insert that brand into any conversation that people are having. So yeah, I mean, data remains pretty agnostic in that kind of context.
And I'd just add to that every partnership is different. So effectively, you package up the rights that you have as a rights holder. And so be that if we go into a relationship, it may be that it's a new brand launching that wants to get brand awareness. And so it's about getting maximum visibility through the club, whether that's the sleeve sponsor or be that board time around the pitch on the digital LEDs which play out globally, through to actually they're just interested in having a social presence. They want to get to a specific market where they know partnering with a brand like Arsenal, for example, will give them that leverage. So really it's about working, we call it a partnership because it is a partnership. It's not about, you know, a chunk of money that doesn't then deliver something. It's about us understanding what the objectives that the brands have and looking at the channels that we operate in and how we can best execute across them. And actually what we're trying to do now is educate brands into becoming more campaign-led, because they can be quite channel-specific, and they expect to email X million, they expect to post in front of X million. And actually it's, you know, if we go back to what I presented, it's about having a fan-first approach. Because if you say something across all channels, it gets diluted, and it's got to be relevant, and it's got to be engaging. So what we do is bring that brand messaging to life through access to the team, to the club, and actually allow that storytelling element that becomes really key through personalisation and presentation.
Because I asked a question based on my experience with the club, and then I saw a lot of companies asking from this partnership, and let's say we put their name on the sleeve, how many eyeballs they will get from the exposure, or what will be the ROI, but the partnership is not about just numbers, it's more about elevating brand together. So from my experience, I had a hard time to provide, and also it's difficult to promise any numbers, because we cannot say, oh, this will give you certain amount of dollars, and if that does not happen, that it's not good for building, it's breaking the trust. So that my question was, that's why I asked questions like how, from the club standpoint,
utilize those data points to explain what the partnership can bring to the company.
Yeah, and there's emerging sophisticated technology you can use now, so artificial intelligence, you can do image reading across social platforms. So we work quite heavily with specific agencies that can look at what cut through a brand is, how many times is the shirt worn, how many times is the logo seen, and this smart helps answer those questions these days. But it's when you've got finite resources, you've got to find the platforms that can allow you to tell the most relevant message to get what you need to done.
Great, thank you, Mick, for that. Okay, I believe that's all the time we have. So please give a round of applause for the Korea Institute of Sports Science for hosting this event, organizing it, and for our fantastic presenters today.